Captain Vax'ul drummed his three-fingered hand against the command console of the Galactic Confederation scout vessel Distant Thunder. His pale blue skin flushed slightly purple with anticipation as they approached the unregistered settlement on Verdun 7, a lush garden world on the outer rim of Confederation space. Sensors show a small colony, Captain. Population estimate, approximately 200 individuals, reported Navigator Trin, her compound eyes flickering across multiple displays. Predominantly human signatures. Vax'ul sighed heavily. Humans. Again. Security Chief Korla unholstered her standard-issue pulse rifle with practiced efficiency. Should we prepare for resistance, sir? Humans have a reputation. No need for that dramatic display, Korla, Vax'ul said, waving a dismissive hand. This is a routine inspection of an unauthorized settlement. They're probably just farmers who forgot to file their colonization permits. Farmers with plasma cannons, Korla pointed to the sensor readings with a talon. Those energy signatures don't look agricultural to me. Vax'ul leaned forward, squinting at the display. Sure enough, the settlement's perimeter showed defensive capabilities that seemed excessive for a simple farming community. His antenna twitched with concern. Hail them, he ordered Communications Officer Zift. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a human female with sun-darkened skin and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical knot. She appeared to be in her 5th or 6th decade by human standards, and wore simple clothing that indeed suggested a farmer rather than a military commander. This is Eleanor Frost of New Hope Colony, she said pleasantly. To what do we owe the pleasure of a Confederation visit? Vax'ul straightened his uniform and adopted his most authoritative posture. Captain Vax'ul of the Galactic Confederation. Your settlement is unregistered and unauthorized. We've detected weapons signatures that exceed civilian parameters. Explain yourselves. Eleanor's smile didn't waver. Oh, that. Well, Captain, why don't you come down and join us for dinner? It's almost sunset here, and my husband Thomas makes an excellent roasted quail. We can discuss our situation over food. Korla made a choking sound. Sir, they could be luring us into a trap. Eleanor laughed, a warm, genuine sound that confused Vax'ul. I assure you, if we wanted to harm you, we wouldn't invite you to dinner first. Humans consider that terribly rude. Against his security chief's protests, Vax'ul agreed. Something about the human woman's demeanor intrigued him. Besides, his career had stalled lately. Perhaps uncovering the mystery of an armed human settlement could provide the boost he needed. A small landing party will join you in 1 hour, he declared. Send coordinates. Wonderful. I'll set extra plates, Eleanor replied before terminating the connection. Korla immediately erupted. Captain, with all due respect, this is madness. Humans are unpredictable and dangerous. Have you forgotten the Proxima incident? The Proxima incident was 30 standard years ago, and those humans were military, not settlers. Vax'ul countered. Besides, I'm curious about their weapons. If they're smugglers or mercenaries, I want to know who they're working for. And if they're simply farmers, asked Navigator Trin. Vax'ul snorted. Since when do farmers need plasma cannons to grow vegetables? 2 hours later, Vax'ul found himself seated at a long wooden table inside a surprisingly comfortable communal dining hall. The settlement was nothing like he'd expected. No military barracks or smuggler's den, but neat rows of modest homes surrounding communal buildings and expansive fields of crops. It resembled thousands of other frontier colonies throughout the galaxy, except for those troubling defensive emplacements. Eleanor Frost sat across from him, while her husband Thomas, a barrel-chested human with a bushy white beard, poured some kind of fermented fruit beverage into carved wooden cups. Korla refused to drink, her hand never straying far from her sidearm. So, Vax'ul began after sampling the surprisingly delicious roasted bird. Explain why peaceful farmers need military-grade weaponry. Thomas and Eleanor exchanged glances. Have you ever heard of Harmony Colony? Thomas asked, his voice softer than his imposing frame suggested. Vax'ul's antennae twitched in recognition. A human settlement destroyed about 8 stellar cycles ago. Pirates, wasn't it? That's the official report. Eleanor said, her previously cheerful demeanor darkening. I lost my sister and her children there. The Confederation patrol ship assigned to that sector was 3 days late, responding to their distress call. Unfortunate, but the Confederation can't protect every unauthorized colony. Korla interjected. That's why proper registration and harmony was registered. Thomas interrupted. Fully compliant with all Confederation regulations. They even surrendered their personal weapons as required by Settlement Code 5.7. Vax'ul shifted uncomfortably. The pirates were well organized. By the time our forces arrived, everyone was dead. Eleanor finished flatly. 143 colonists, farmers, teachers, children, all because they followed the rules and trusted the Confederation to protect them. A heavy silence fell over the table. After harmony, Thomas continued, refilling cups. Many of us frontier folk came to an understanding. We respect the Confederation, Captain. Truly we do, but we also understand its limitations. Eleanor nodded. The galaxy is vast, help is often distant, so we protect ourselves. Vax'ul considered this. Those defensive systems I detected aren't standard market fare. They're military grade. Surplus, Thomas said with a shrug. Decommissioned Confederation equipment bought legally through third parties. Nothing illegal about it. Actually, Corla interjected. Regulation 84.12 specifically prohibits civilian. The regulation prohibits active military equipment. Eleanor corrected with a knowing smile. All our systems are technically obsolete by Confederation military standards. Just happens they're still quite effective against pirates. Vax'ul narrowed his eyes. You seem remarkably well versed in Confederation law for simple farmers. Thomas laughed, a booming sound that made the glasses on the table vibrate. I was a legal advisor for Terran colonial affairs before retiring. Eleanor here was a marine combat engineer. Many of our colonists have similar backgrounds, veterans and bureaucrats playing farmer. Corla's hand moved closer to her weapon. Not playing. Eleanor corrected gently. We are farmers. We grow food, raise animals, build homes, have families. We just happen to be farmers who remember our past skills. A young human child dashed into the hall, stopping abruptly upon noticing the aliens. Instead of showing fear, her eyes widened with curiosity. Grandma, is that a real Kithra? She asked, pointing at Vax'ul's species with undisguised fascination. Lyra, it's not polite to point. Eleanor admonished gently. But yes, Captain Vax'ul is a Kithra. Why don't you go help Ravi with dessert? After the child scampered off, Vax'ul found himself asking. You have children here, yet maintain weapons that could destroy my ship. Does that not strike you as contradictory? Eleanor's eyes held his gaze. Captain, it is precisely because we have children that we maintain those weapons. The universe isn't always kind to those who can't defend themselves. Thomas leaned forward. We're not militants or rebels. We file our agricultural exports, pay appropriate taxes, and respect Confederation law. We simply supplement the protection you provide. Which brings us to why you're really here. Eleanor added. You need to register us. Yes, Vax'ul nodded slowly, still processing everything he'd learned. I should cite you for unauthorized defensive systems. You could, Thomas acknowledged. Or you could register our colony and note that our defensive capabilities fall within special frontier provisions of Settlement Act 249. There is no such provision, Corla objected. Actually, Thomas smiled. It's rarely invoked, but it exists for colonies established in regions with documented security concerns. Given the Harmony incident, and 3 other attacks within this sector in the past decade, we clearly qualify. Lyra returned, carefully carrying a tray of what appeared to be some sort of baked confection. The child's innocent presence amid this discussion of weapons and colonial regulations created a cognitive dissonance that Vax'ul found difficult to reconcile. Try the berry tart, Eleanor urged. Lyra picked the berries herself this morning. As they ate dessert, Vax'ul observed the community through the large windows of the dining hall. Humans of various ages moved about their evening routines, tending gardens, repairing equipment, children playing games. Nothing suggested militancy or rebellion. Yet he knew those pleasant-looking buildings concealed weapon systems that made his security chief nervous. Let me show you something before you decide, Eleanor said, as if reading his thoughts. She led the Confederation officers to a small memorial garden at the colony center. Stone markers bore the names of those lost at Harmony Colony and other frontier settlements. Fresh flowers decorated each marker. "We're not arming ourselves against the Confederation, Captain," Eleanor said softly. "We're arming ourselves against a universe that doesn't always arrive in time to help. We remember our fallen by ensuring their fate isn't repeated here." Vax'ul's antenna drooped slightly as he studied the memorial. "My superiors won't be pleased," he muttered. "Your superiors don't need to know every detail," Thomas suggested. "Register us as a standard agricultural colony with enhanced security measures appropriate to the sector's threat assessment." Technically accurate, bureaucratically vague. Corla began to object, but Vax'ul silenced her with a raised hand. "I'll need to inspect these defensive systems," he said firmly, "to ensure they're truly obsolete." Eleanor's weather-worn face broke into a grin. "Of course, Captain. First thing tomorrow. Tonight, however, we're celebrating Lyra's 8th birthday. Would you and your crew care to join us? There will be cake." As the evening progressed, Vax'ul found himself in the peculiar position of watching his security chief reluctantly teaching curious human children about Kithra culture while Thomas explained the nuances of human agricultural techniques. Somewhere between the 5th cup of apple cider and watching Navigator Trin attempt human dancing, Vax'ul had an epiphany. These humans weren't threatening because they were armed. They were armed because they felt threatened. A subtle distinction that his academy training hadn't covered. Their weapons weren't symbols of aggression but monuments to a determination that what happened at Harmony would never happen again, at least not without a fight. "Your defensive capabilities," Vax'ul said quietly to Eleanor as they watched the festivities. "They're not just physical deterrents, are they? They're psychological comfort." Eleanor nodded, her eyes on the playing children. "When you've seen what happens to the defenseless, Captain, you understand that peace isn't just the absence of conflict. Peace is having the capacity to defend yourself so thoroughly that conflict becomes undesirable to potential aggressors. An armed society is a polite society." Vax'ul quoted a human saying he'd once heard. Eleanor laughed. "Something like that. Though we prefer to think of it as a prepared community is a confident one. We sleep better knowing those defensive systems are watching the skies, even if they're technically illegal," he challenged. "Even then," she agreed without remorse. "Some rules are worth bending to protect what matters most." As Vax'ul looked around at the thriving community, at children playing without fear under the watchful eyes of both their elders and concealed defense turrets, he found himself making a decision that would likely complicate his next performance review. "I believe I've found that special frontier provision in the regulations," he said finally. "How fortunate that your colony qualifies." Eleanor's smile was knowing. "How fortunate indeed, Captain." The morning after Lyra's birthday celebration brought a sobering clarity to Captain Vax'ul. His head throbbed from the human fermented beverages, a rookie mistake he wouldn't repeat. But his decision remained firm. He would find a way to register this colony without compromising their defensive capabilities. Eleanor met him outside the command center, a repurposed prefabricated structure that looked innocuous enough from the outside. "Ready for the grand tour?" she asked, punching a code into the door panel. Corla, still visibly uncomfortable, checked her sidearm for the 3rd time that morning. "I still think this is a terrible idea, Captain." "Your objection is noted, Security Chief," Vax'ul replied curtly. Again, the doors slid open to reveal a modest command center. Vax'ul had expected something more intimidating. Perhaps humans in military uniforms manning battle stations. Instead, he found a room with 6 monitoring stations, each attended by colonists in practical work clothes. A large holographic display dominated the center, showing a detailed map of the surrounding 50 kilometers with various data overlays. "This is James." Eleanor gestured to a dark-skinned human male with close-cropped gray hair. "Former Terran Defense Force tactical officer, now our head of security and part-time teacher." James nodded respectfully. "Captain, we've been monitoring your vessel since it entered the system. Impressive response time." Vax'ul's antenna twitched with surprise. "You detected us that far out." "Our approach was standard stealth protocol." James smiled thinly. "Perhaps Confederation stealth protocol could use an update. Or perhaps your detection equipment isn't as obsolete as you claimed," Corla countered. The equipment is indeed outdated. A new voice interjected. A human female with artificial limbs approached from a side room, extending her mechanical hand. The operators, however, are not. Priya Mehta, systems engineer. Those sensor arrays are 15 years old, but we've optimized them. Vax'ul accepted the handshake cautiously. Optimization beyond manufacturer specifications is completely legal under Confederation Salvage and Reuse Directive 11. Point 3. Priya finished for him. I authored the technical amendments to that directive before retiring from the Terran Colonial Administration. Is everyone in this colony a former military or government official? Korla asked incredulously. Eleanor laughed. Hardly. We have doctors, teachers, botanists, geologists, people from all walks of life. But yes, many of us have backgrounds that proved useful when establishing a frontier colony, especially one that needs to protect itself. Vax'ul added pointedly. Exactly. Eleanor acknowledged without apology. Now, shall we continue? The tour progressed through the colony's defensive systems, perimeter sensors that could detect a mouse at 3 kilometers, atmospheric interference generators that could scramble targeting systems, and finally, the weapons emplacements that had triggered the Confederation's interest. At the eastern perimeter, a camouflaged bunker housed what appeared to be standard point defense turrets. However, Vax'ul's trained eye immediately spotted the modifications. These aren't just surplus defense turrets, he said, examining the systems. You've modified the focusing arrays. These could punch through a light cruiser's shields. Thomas, who had joined them, nodded. A necessary precaution. The pirates who hit Harmony Colony used stolen Confederation patrol vessels. Vax'ul's head snapped up. That wasn't in the official report. No, Eleanor confirmed. It wasn't, but we recovered black box data that the official investigation missed. Or ignored, Thomas added quietly. The implication hung heavily in the air. Vax'ul had spent his career believing in the Confederation's integrity. The suggestion that officials might have covered up the use of stolen military vessels in a civilian massacre was disturbing. Why wouldn't the Confederation acknowledge this? Navigator Trin asked, speaking for the first time since they'd landed. Politics, James answered flatly. Admitting they'd lost control of military vessels to pirates would trigger mandatory security reviews across all frontier sectors. Expensive, inconvenient. Cheaper to write off a small colony as an unfortunate incident, Priya added bitterly. Vax'ul felt his worldview shifting uncomfortably. You're suggesting we're not suggesting anything, Captain, Eleanor interrupted gently. We're simply explaining why we take our security seriously. The galaxy is complex, and sometimes bureaucracies make calculations that frontier colonies can't afford to accept. They continued the tour, each revelation adding layers to Vax'ul's understanding of the colony's seemingly paradoxical nature. These humans weren't rebellious. They were pragmatic. They'd created a peaceful community that could bear formidable teeth when necessary. At midday, they stopped at a school where children of various ages were engaged in lessons. Vax'ul noticed that alongside traditional subjects, older children were learning basic defense and survival skills. You teach combat to children? Korla asked, clearly disturbed. We teach self-reliance, corrected a heavy-set human male who introduced himself as Ravi, the head teacher. Survival skills, threat assessment, basic medical treatment, knowledge that keeps people alive. And weapons training, Vax'ul inquired. Only for those 16 and older, and only with parental consent, Ravi explained. We're not creating soldiers, Captain. We're creating citizens who understand that freedom sometimes requires defense. Lyra spotted them from her classroom and waved enthusiastically. Vax'ul found himself waving back before he could stop himself. That child, he said quietly to Eleanor as they left the school. She's your granddaughter. Eleanor nodded, her expression softening. My daughter's child. We lost her mother at Harmony. Vax'ul felt something shift in his perception. So Lyra is a survivor, Eleanor confirmed. One of only 3 people who made it off Harmony alive. She was barely a year old. The personal connection to the tragedy changed everything. This wasn't abstract policy to these humans. It was deeply personal history written in blood and loss. Captain, Eleanor said, stopping at the edge of the colony's main square, there's something else you should see. She led them to what appeared to be an ordinary barn at the settlement's edge. Inside, however, was anything but ordinary. A small spacecraft sat in the center, a sleek, modified transport with obvious combat capabilities. "This is the Phoenix," Thomas explained. "Our emergency evacuation vessel." Vax'ul circled the ship with professional appreciation. "This isn't just an evacuation vessel. Those are military-grade engines and weapon mounts." "Correct," James confirmed. "It can outrun most pursuit vessels and defend itself if necessary." "This," Corla declared triumphantly, "is definitely illegal under Confederation law. Civilian colonies are prohibited from maintaining armed spacecraft." "Actually," Priya countered, "it's registered as a historical artifact. The Phoenix participated in the Terran-Raxiri conflict. Under Cultural Preservation Act 87.2, historical military vessels maintained in working condition are permitted for educational purposes." "Educational purposes," Corla scoffed. "This ship is ready for combat. History is best understood through functional preservation," Thomas said with a perfectly straight face. Vax'ul suppressed what humans would call a smile. These colonists had found every loophole, exploited every regulatory ambiguity, and created a fortress disguised as a farming community, all technically within the boundaries of Confederation law. "One last stop," Eleanor announced. She brought them to a simple building near the colony's center. Unlike the other structures, this one appeared to be made of natural stone rather than prefabricated materials. Inside was a single room with walls covered in photographs, personal items, and names, hundreds of names. "Our real security system," Eleanor said softly. Vax'ul moved closer to examine the display. Each name belonged to someone lost in frontier attacks, not just Harmony, but dozens of other colonies over the decades. Some items seemed insignificant, a child's toy, a kitchen utensil, a worn book, but each represented a life extinguished. "Every colonist visits this room before they make major decisions," Thomas explained. "We call it the Remembrance Chamber. It keeps perspective and purpose," Eleanor added. "We built New Hope not just to survive, but to ensure others can too." "Others?" Trin asked. James nodded. "We've helped establish 12 other colonies in the past 4 years, all with similar defensive capabilities." This revelation stunned Vax'ul. "You're creating a network of armed settlements." "We prefer prepared communities," Thomas corrected. "We share information, resources, technical expertise. If one colony detects a threat, all are notified. That's why your communications array exceeded standard specifications," Vax'ul realized. "Indeed," Priya confirmed. "Our network can relay warnings faster than the official Confederation emergency channels." The implications were staggering. These weren't just isolated settlers, but an organized, cooperative network of colonies creating their own security infrastructure parallel to official channels. Not quite a military force, but not merely civilian either. "You understand our dilemma, Captain," Eleanor said, watching his reaction carefully. "We respect the Confederation. We don't seek independence or conflict. But we've learned that depending solely on distant authorities for protection is a luxury frontier colonies cannot afford." Back in the colony's meeting hall, Vax'ul faced the settlement's council's 7 representatives, including Eleanor, Thomas, James, and Priya. The time for decision had come. "Your colony exists in a gray area of Confederation law," Vax'ul began formally. "Your defensive capabilities exceed civilian parameters. Your communications network operates outside standard protocols. And your historical artifact spacecraft would give most patrol captains reason for arrest." The council remained silent, watching him intently. "However," he continued, "I find no evidence of hostile intent toward the Confederation. Your security measures, while extensive, appear genuinely defensive in nature." "They are," Eleanor confirmed. "Absolutely." Vax'ul made his decision. "I will register New Hope Colony as a frontier agricultural settlement with enhanced security protocols. This designation falls under Section 42.7 of the Colonial Administrative Code, originally designed for settlements in contested border regions." "But we're not in a contested region," Corla objected. "Recent pirate activity suggests otherwise." Vax'ul countered smoothly. "The Harmony incident alone justifies the classification. And our defensive systems?" Thomas asked cautiously. will be classified as appropriate countermeasures to documented threats. I'll need a complete inventory, but I see no need to include specific capabilities in my report. Relief washed across the council members' faces. James extended his hand in the human gesture. Thank you, Captain. Your understanding means more than you know. Don't thank me yet, Vax'ul warned. This registration comes with conditions. First, you will share your sensor data with Confederation patrols in this sector. Your detection capabilities exceed ours, and that information could save lives. Agreed, Eleanor said without hesitation. Second, any additional colonies in your network must be registered. I can't protect settlements I don't know exist. Thomas nodded. Reasonable. We'll provide coordinates for secure communication. Finally, Vax'ul concluded, I want New Hope to serve as a training site for Confederation officers assigned to Frontier Patrol. Your practical expertise in frontier defense clearly exceeds our standard training. This last condition surprised them. After a brief consultation, Eleanor agreed. We would welcome the opportunity to bridge the gap between frontier colonies and Confederation forces. Later that evening, as Vax'ul prepared to return to his ship, Eleanor walked with him to the landing pad. Your report will raise eyebrows at command, she noted. Undoubtedly, he agreed. But it's the right decision. The Confederation was established to protect all its citizens, not just those in convenient locations. And if your superiors disagree, Vax'ul's antenna straightened with determination. Then I'll remind them that the alternative is driving settlements like yours underground, creating precisely the kind of tension the Confederation was formed to prevent. A small figure ran toward them, Lyra, clutching something in her hands. Captain, she called. I made this for you, so you remember us. She handed him a crudely woven bracelet of colored threads. It's a friendship bracelet, she explained seriously. Grandma says friends look out for each other, even when they're far away. Vax'ul carefully accepted the gift, awkwardly fitting it over his narrow wrist. I will wear it with honor, Lyra. As his shuttle lifted off, Vax'ul gazed down at the peaceful-looking settlement. From orbit one would never guess the formidable defenses concealed beneath those simple structures. He thought about the memorial room, about Lyra's bracelet, about the delicate balance between security and freedom. His report would indeed raise questions at command. Some might accuse him of being manipulated by sympathetic humans with a compelling story. Perhaps they were right, but he'd seen the faces in the memorial room. He'd witnessed the genuine peace of a community that felt secure despite frontier dangers. Most importantly, he'd glimpsed a truth that his academy training had never addressed sometimes. True peace requires the capacity for decisive defense. These humans didn't carry weapons because they sought conflict. They carried them because they understood that in the vastness of space help might arrive too late. As the distant thunder broke orbit, communications officer Zift approached him. Incoming transmission, Captain. It's command. They're asking for a preliminary report on the unregistered colony. Vax'ul glanced down at the colorful bracelet on his wrist. Tell them. We've discovered a unique opportunity for improving frontier security across the sector. He paused thoughtfully. And schedule a meeting with the Colonial Affairs Liaison when we return. I believe certain regulations regarding frontier settlements require review. Korla, overhearing this, gave him a long look. You're risking your career, Captain. Perhaps, Vax'ul acknowledged. Or perhaps I'm finally understanding what our uniform truly represents. As the stars stretched into streaks of light around them, Vax'ul reflected on what he'd learned from the humans of New Hope Colony. The most effective peacekeepers weren't always those with the most regulations, but those who understood when flexibility served the greater good. And sometimes true security came not from disarming potential threats, but from ensuring that those who sought peace had the means to maintain it, even when those means included weapons that could frighten a military fleet.